Myanmar enters into a new era of political and economic transition. One of the biggest problems it will face is the problem of corruption. Corruption is a serious and endemic issue in Myanmar, being ranked the 5th most corrupt country in the world by Transparency International this year. Furthermore, corruption has spread not only to the business sector and government, but even to the educational sector and religious authorities. This video seeks to offer some insights into the causes and consequences of corruption, as well as the strategies which have been employed by government, non-governmental organizations, and the private sector worldwide to end corruption. Finally, as the government in Myanmar rightly and courageously seeks to tackle the problem of corruption, this video will offer 5 primary strategies for fighting corruption in Myanmar and bringing it to an end. Let's briefly discuss the causes and consequences of corruption. These can take place in the political, economic, and social spheres. Politically, a failure to have good processes, institutions, and actions by the government will all lead to corruption. A lack of accountability or poor supervision, having weak rule of law institutions or too much discretionary power, and not enforcing a country's anti-corruption laws are all factors which may lead to corruption. Economically, the 2 main incentives for corruption are low pay and a monopoly on economic rent. Socially, having widespread cultural practice of corruption and poor ethics and inequality may all reinforce corruption taking place. The social consequences of corruption include a reinforcement of poor societal ethics and social inequality. Furthermore, it may lead to a loss of professionalism and the failure of essential public services. Economically, inefficiency and the loss of foreign investment may result due to the increased cost of transactions, poor allocation of resources, and a loss of confidence in the society. Politically, a lack of rule of law, ineffective governance, loss of democracy, and a loss of trust and credibility may result. This may lead to a loss of moral authority of the government, a weak civil society, and unequal politics which favours the rich. There may also be a loss of talent, as otherwise talented individuals become disillusioned and leave public service. This demonstrates the importance of fighting corruption effectively. Governments worldwide engage in various strategies to fight corruption, both preventive and corrective. Such strategies may include a stable tax structure, paying market equivalent salaries, and advertising campaigns such as this one seen from Hong Kong. The government may also require its people to declare personal finances and reject, declare, or pay for gifts, which we will return to. The government may also engage in electronic methods of payment, procurement, taxes, and recruitment, as seen in these examples from the USA, India, Singapore, and Portugal. The Declaration of Finances, Assets and Wealth is particularly pertinent in Myanmar, which has just required its civil servants to do this in the anti-corruption bill. Such a gift policy may also prove to be useful in Myanmar, which has a tea money culture where corruption is seen as normal and part of a cultural practice. Corrective methods that the government can engage in include having strong laws, establishing anti-corruption bureau, a whistleblower system, sting operations, extraterritorial laws, and enforcing its laws in a proper manner. Myanmar has just established a new anti-corruption commission under the chairmanship of its vice president, following the examples of Hong Kong, China, India, Singapore, and Indonesia. It is hoped that this bureau will prove to be strong, independent, and credible in clamping down on corruption in Myanmar. The private sector and non-governmental organizations have employed various strategies to prevent and combat corruption. In the private sector, an emphasis on financial integrity and research and reporting has proved to be decisive. Transparency International has also chaired a steering committee for business principles, comprising members from businesses, civil society, trade unions, and independent experts, who have together drafted a set of business principles for countering bribery. This may prove to be a well-established guide for Myanmar as it seeks to decrease corruption and develop its business sector. For non-governmental organizations, various strategies have been employed. The NGO Transparency Barometer has helped to determine how transparent NGOs are in the use of their finances, engaging with committees of concerned citizens at the grassroots level, and following the Charter of Good Practices drafted by the French NGO Coordination CERP has also been helpful. Oxfam was one of the first NGOs to adopt a zero tolerance for bribes policy and to avoid making bribes itself. Although this was inconvenient as Oxfam sought to get into several developing countries, in the long run, it has increased the transparency, respectability, and effectiveness of Oxfam and other NGOs. Finally, the Indian NGO Janagraha has created an innovative website, ipaedabribe.com, to allow people to report anonymously their own bribe payments and officials who take bribes. This has helped to create a zero-tolerance policy for bribes in India and to decrease the idea that it is a normal part of culture. Myanmar has taken the significant step of becoming the latest state party to the UN Convention Against Corruption in 2012 and initiated a third wave of reform, including a new corruption bill and commission to eliminate corruption in Myanmar. These heartening initial steps will be strengthened by 5 immediate and key strategies. The first is to improve the independence, credibility, and transparency of the Anti-Corruption Commission, which is currently made up of government ministers and advisors. Well-respected civil society members, opposition politicians, and NGO representatives should also sit on the Commission to ensure political independence and to engender trust in the Commission. Such independence should also be ensured in the implementation of the Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative, or EITI, an NGO-driven project to improve transparency in the mining and oil industries that is currently spearheaded by former government officials. Given the importance of the extractive industries to Myanmar's growth, such transparency initiatives must be perceived as independent and trustworthy by investors, companies, and people at large. Secondly, there are currently no specific penalties for corrupt bureaucrats and officials in Myanmar in the new anti-corruption bill. In order to punish and deter corrupt activity, criminal sanctions in the form of strict imprisonment sentences and fines should be imposed. Government officials who are convicted of corrupt activities may also be prohibited from holding any elected office or from voting in elections if the offence was election-related. For smaller offences, corrupt officials or bribe payers might be made to engage in public community service, which compensates the community and also publicly deters corrupt activity. Thirdly, apart from criminal sanctions, asset recovery is an important part of the effort by governments to repair the calm down by corruption. This commonly involves repatriating the proceeds of corruption from foreign jurisdictions and will require assistance from the government of other jurisdictions and Interpol to trace and recover these proceeds. Fourthly, a sound anti-corruption system must also protect those who are courageous enough to speak out against corrupt activity. They must be assured that their anonymity will be guaranteed and that they will not be punished for speaking out against corrupt government officials. One solution is to have anonymous whistleblowing to the Anti-Corruption Commission. To make this more open and effective, an online system such as that implemented by the Indian NGO Janagraha might be implemented. Whistleblowers must however be credible and willing to testify in court in order to ensure that the rule of law and due process remain paramount and that people are not falsely accused of corrupt activity. Finally, Myanmar has seen soaring inflation in recent years. Corruption might hence result from the unpleasant reality that people cannot sustain an adequate standard of living on their existing salaries. This reinforces the T-money culture that legitimizes corruption. While the government has twice increased the salary of civil servants in the past 7 years, the burgeoning problem of corruption suggests that these increases are not yet adequate. Paying civil servants, employees, an appropriate and market-pegged salary would give them less incentives to take bribes and act corruptly, and enable them to act with honesty and integrity. In conclusion, it is essential that Myanmar seeks to combat the problem of corruption, and heartening that it has already taken preliminary steps in doing so. What is required now is an unyielding commitment to removing corrupt elements in the public and private sectors, regardless of their rank, status, and wealth. This alone will set the ground for a transformed and respectable Myanmar for all.